a fight to forge a railway through Australia's most impossible landscapes.
The Tablelands line is in many ways a symbol of the human spirit.
Trying to build a railway in such a swampy area, you would be right up here in water. You know, the difficulty is immense.
An underground discovery that would change the region's fortunes.
The risks were rockfalls, explosions.
People died. People had life-changing injuries.
How could a secret World War II military base help in the fight against Japan?
Whoever found the cure would win the war.
And a silver bullet carving a path through the outback.
There's no crossings. There's no barriers. The wildlife is on the tracks.
There's a lot of secrets attached to it. The whole thing's just awesome.
This is the Tablelands Railway Network, and here is its hidden story. In this series, we explore some of the greatest railways in the world and the secrets surrounding them. From the ancient hills of Europe to the wastes of the Yukon Valley in North America, their dark and forgotten pasts have left their mark on history.
The Tablelands line is serious railway building. I mean, this isn't just negotiating a mountain pass or a swamp. It's kind of doing every challenge that you can possibly face and overcoming it.
Imagine trying to survey when you cannot see the sky. Imagine you can't tell north from south by the position of the sun. This is an impenetrable forest to get through.
On a wet, horrible day when it's absolutely teeming down with rain and there's water running down the track and you're soaking wet, covered in leeches, it takes another dimension.
And of course, it comes at a great human cost. A lot of these poor people who had come from all over the world were working in atrocious conditions and worked to their death. But the fact that it takes nearly a quarter of a century to build this line means that there were people there who were never going to give up, no matter what was being thrown against them.
Built in the northeastern tip of Australia, in the state of Queensland, the original railway line of the network stretched from Cairns on the Pacific coast and finished inland at the town of Herberton. Hidden under the canopy, thousands of holes lead to an underground world that holds the secret to why the train was built in the first place. Duncan Ray is a local adventurer.
This area between Herberton and Chilligo has the most diverse geology of any place in the world. You find pretty much everything here. Tin, gold, silver, copper, indium, antimony. It's just endless.
This railway line was built to make money for the mining industry, but it ended up playing its part in the biggest conflict the world has ever seen.
We tend to think of the Second World War as quite a European-centric conflict, but of course the war in the Far East was just as big, if not more so.
Australia, of course, was right in the forefront of this war, and not many people know that Queensland became one of the major Allied bases in the region.
What's really important about the story of this railway line is that it tells us so much about what Australia did for the fight against the Japanese.
Away from the public eye, the railway line was helping with a huge military project. Joe Barnes' father was part of the Australian Army during the war.
The whole war here is a bit of a secret. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and were moving into the Pacific.
Australia was next in line. In February 1942, they bombed the northern tip of the country. The whole nation was under threat.
There was a line drawn across Brisbane called the Brisbane Line. It was said that, oh, we'll lose all that part of Northern Australia, we'll get it back later. The General Blamey saying, no, we won't do that, we will defend.
How did this region and its railways end up playing a role in the fight against Japan? To find out, we need to go back to the heady days of the Industrial Revolution.
At the end of the 19th century, the whole world is exploding. It's going crazy for raw materials to build towns and railways and infrastructure. And top of the list of desirable items is tin.
Prospectors were searching the tablelands for raw materials to mine. Local historian Mary Searston returns to the place where it all started.
The whole reason for the Herberton tin field was, in fact, a rock like this, which was picked up by the original prospectors. And the funny part about it is they didn't recognise it as ore until an emu came screaming down those hills and kicked its foot against a rock like this and went limping away. They smelt it and got a little tiny weeny bit of tin, or so the folklore says. The gleams that you see are pure tin oxide. It was just so rich. 71% of this rock, at least, was just pure tin.
But this precious tin, so in demand across the world, was 40 miles away from the coast.
Nature doesn't put tin in convenient places. And to get it out the ground, you need equipment. And we're not just talking about a few wagon loads. We're talking about tons and tons of equipment.
The tin ore was contained in the granite rocks that are in the area, and they had to be crushed down. And just behind me is one of those crushing mills. It's called a battery because there are 5 big steel feet that were lifted up and down, and any rocks that got caught underneath were crushed down to a very fine powder.
It's ridiculous to be shifting that stuff by hand. They needed a mechanical way to do it.
The only lines of communication between Herberton and the coast were muddy tracks that were washed away in the monsoon rainy seasons.
6 months to travel the 40 miles across rainforest, bogged to the axles at times. Compare that to the railways. That same piece of equipment probably be here in Herberton the next or the day after.
A railway line was the answer. But first, they would have to conquer nature.
As a railway engineer, if you want a challenge, the Tablelands Railway will give it to you. It starts off in the mangrove swamps, heads into rainforest, and then through the mountains. And then you'll find yourself in the bush environment. 4 incredibly different, very challenging environments in a relatively short distance.
The 40 miles that separated Herberton from the coast didn't only present a challenging terrain. There was also the threatening wildlife. Crocodile-infested rivers, spiders and snakes lurking in the dense forest, and even trees were to be feared. Tim Daniel is an Australian Reserve Army major and a survival expert.
So this is probably not unlike the conditions that the early explorers experienced in the 1870s. This sort of vine thicket is typical of what you get on these steep slopes. So this is one of the dangers in the rainforest. It's called wait a while, or lawyer vine. It's a cane, and it throws out these little tendrils with recurved hooks on them. If you get into a big thicket of this, it can take you hours because you get tangled up in it. You have to unpick yourself or cut yourself out of it. There's no shadows, there's no reference point, so unless you've got a compass and you understand the lie of the land, it's very difficult to navigate.
Not only was it difficult to navigate, the railway surveyors would have to cross the tribal lands of local Aboriginal populations.
There are two histories to the land in that part of Australia. There's the history that came with the white settlers and all of their doings, but then there's the history of the Aboriginal people, which goes back 40,000 years.
The authorities were going to need help. In 1882, they contacted a mysterious and unusual man by the name of Christy Palmerston. A secretive character with unknown origins who they trusted to find a route for the railway to the coast.
Now, Christy Palmerston was a very important character. Well, certainly he thought so. He was a bushman, an explorer. He'd done a lot of work in the Cairns region. He had a sidekick called Pompo.
Pompo was a local Aboriginal who could guide Palmerston through the ancestral indigenous tracks that crisscrossed the jungle.
Christy Palmerston spent 3 months combing the country between Port Douglas and the Barron Gorge, looking for suitable gradients. And he makes that remark that he just couldn't see where a railway could come through.
In spite of the impossible landscape, Palmerston eventually put a route forward. He recommended going from Port Douglas, that was then a thriving harbour town in the north. This option avoided having to build any tunnels and included very few bridges. In the end, though, the dwindling town of Cairns was chosen because it was thought to have a better port. But that meant building 15 tunnels and no less than 90 bridges. For better or worse, the line would start in Cairns. Now all they had to do was build it. But that was easier said than done. Building in the tropics meant that the weather was a constant worry. In this area, there is an annual average of 7 feet of rainfall and regular cyclones.
Nature threw quite a lot of curveballs up on the line between Hobbiton and Cairns, but you have to get over it in engineering terms. You have to see each new challenge as something to rise to and to force that railway through. They really did meet an awful lot of challenges.
The first hurdle was that Cairns was built on a challenging terrain.
You can see here why they had so much difficulty in trying to build a railway in such a swampy area, and we're walking in the dry season. This would have been, you would be up to your knees or right up here in water. You know, the difficulty is immense. And of course, not only swamps, you've got snakes. You've brown snakes, taipans, black snakes, and leeches, as well as a myriad of mosquitoes, which of course helped spread fever amongst the workers and brought them down very easily.
To make it worse, the railway contractors, trying to keep costs low, weren't offering proper health care to their workers. The Cairns Post reported the story of a man who was suffering from a fever.
When they got him to the hospital, he had a small hole in the bottom of his back, which was maggot-ridden, and he was covered from knee to shoulders in human excrement, and he died in the hospital.
And the challenge had just begun. After the swamps, the railway builders had to reach the top of the Tablelands by carving through the hostile jungle on a steep incline that went over 1,000 feet.
When you set out to map out a railway line, you want to find the flattest spot, the lowest points to take that track through. Following the rivers are a fantastic way to do that. And the Barron River just took you naturally through to where you wanted to go.
But using the river was not enough to keep the costs down. Monsoon season, mudslides, and multiple route changes meant that the expenses escalated. In the end, building the first 32 miles cost the equivalent of £165 million in today's money. It was an incredible achievement, but in 1890, Australia hit a decade of financial turmoil. The funds for the line to Herberton were pulled out, and building works were dropped. But one man stepped in.
A gentleman by the name of John Moffett, who was a mining entrepreneur from the 1880s, decided he could do it. He never overbuilt anything. So his railways tended to be a little bit light on rail size. Starting in 1900, they were put down very quickly. In the next 3 years, he built over 200 miles of railway.
These railways linked his mining empire in the west to the existing line. The original route had been completely diverted away from Herberton. One of those lines led to the town of Irvinbank.
This is the old original railway formation. This is what it would be like coming in by train into Irvinbank. John Moffett set his whole empire up based on this little community here. So you can see the lovely lake on your left with the hotels over there, and then you'd hear the stamping of the battery, the 30 head of stampers crushing the rocks. This is the old railway station here. It's a nice long corrugated iron building with windows along the top to allow light to come in. This and Herberton became the premium mining towns of North Queensland and probably the centre of tin mining in Australia.
One of Moffett's most lucrative deposits was based just outside Irvinbank. Vulcan Mine was the deepest tin mine in Australia and yielded some of the purest tin in the world at the time. The railways and the mines had a workforce that made themselves heard. And it's no coincidence that the first socialist government in the world was elected there back then. Albeit for a week only. Despite a strong union and left-leaning policies, working underground was harsh, to say the least.
The decision to go and work in a mine is never going to be easy. It's never going to be anyone's first glamorous job to take up. You go there to earn money, and you do earn good money, but at what cost?
Time has stood still in these abandoned mines. Objects left behind by the last workers give a snapshot of life underground at the turn of the 20th century.
It's hot and sticky in here, and when they're working in here, they would be covered in dust. Some of them got myostasis and died from that. So it looks like this might be the end of the tunnel here. And looks like they've gone uphill, up into started to form a shaft going up. That glowing little area there, that's the last remnants of the tin. This could have been, a few $100 or maybe a few $1,000s worth of tin out of this little pocket. The risks were rock falls, explosions. My great uncle, he worked in a mine in Charters Towers, and at one stage the rock started moving and the timbers were starting to groan and creak under the weight of the falling or the loosening rock. So he held the timbers up while the other miners that were working with him were able to escape out of the mine. But the sheer weight of holding that up ruptured all his stomach, and he died a couple of days later, unfortunately.
People died, people got sick, people had life-changing injuries. So that balance between the money in your pocket and your health had to be very, very carefully weighed up.
After the Australian Depression was over, the train line carried on growing south and finally reached Herberton in 1910. Mining by then was not as lucrative as it once was, but the lines took on other purposes. They were used for timber trade, railway ambulances, and for transporting students on their way to school. In the 1940s, though, something very strange happened to the region.
With the Second World War, this area in the middle of nowhere exploded. Suddenly you've got thousands of troops coming and going.
World War II brought a huge spike in railway traffic in the region. It went up by 66%. And notably, on the Cairns to Herberton line, in one 24-hour period, there were 43 trains, as opposed to the usual sleepy 1 or 2.
But why was there so much activity in this remote part of Australia?
Australian troops fought all over the world during the Second World War. They fought in North Africa, the Middle East. They fought defending Singapore, in Thailand, Burma, you name it. But they also fought on the island of New Guinea, which is just under 100 miles from the Queensland coast. So this is right on Australia's doorstep. This is fighting for the defence of the homeland.
The fight in New Guinea was so close that people living in Cairns said they could hear the bombs. They needed a military base in Australia to support the Allied fight, and they found it in the Atherton Tablelands.
Part of the reason they chose this area is because of the railway. That infrastructure, that civil engineering, allowed huge numbers to come in and to be transported around, goods and people.
That enabled the Australians to rapidly fortify the area and turn it into a military zone.
This top-secret project transformed the area into a hive of activity. They built fortifications, radar stations, an airfield, anti-aircraft units, supply facilities, and barracks. They were all there to accommodate the tens of thousands of Australian and American troops that took over the sparsely populated region. Thanks to the Tablelands' mild climate and tropical geography, It was the perfect location for troops to prepare for fighting in the Pacific.
We're in Kalunga, and we're on a feature I'd call Tactics Hill. And this was used by the 16th Brigade for training. And they dug in an entire battalion defensive position on this little ridge. Going around with a metal detector, we found piles of used cartridges from both Owen guns and Bren guns. It was used as a teaching device, and they practiced attacking and defending here. The railway line runs along on the other side of the river. It's well within weapons range. I think this position was chosen mostly because of its tactical teaching, but also the theory would have been that it blocked the use of the railway. So if the Japanese decided to advance along the railway, this position would have effectively prevented them from moving along the railway.
North of Kalunga stands an old building. It is the old Tolga Station. Now a museum, there is very little clue to the pivotal role it played during World War II. Lottie Hasty remembers.
The station was up there. You could see that. And this was where there used to be 2 tanks up very high, filled with water, where the trains used to come in there and fill up their engine. You know, the railwaymen were kept very busy on keeping the lines up to date. They couldn't afford an accident with, you know, thousands of troops on board. It was a busy station.
But Tolga Station hides another secret. A few kilometers along the railway, there are historic remains in a place called Rocky Creek.
So today, what you can see at Rocky Creek is but a shadow of what it was like during the war. Much of the site is neglected. You've just got these old walkways left covered in bitumen. You've got some pipes left over from toilets and bathing blocks.
But what are these abandoned remains doing in this area? And why are they so close to where the railway once ran?
Rocky Creek was the biggest hospital complex in the Southern Hemisphere.
The huge hospital complex built out of the bush, built where there was nothing there before.
It was built incredibly quickly for a purpose, out of canvas and then later on bits of concrete on the foundations, in a very temporary kind of way.
And eventually it became an enormous complex with 1,200 beds in the military zone, treating all sorts of patients, war wounded, those suffering from venereal disease and even psychiatric disorders.
In its 3 years of operation, 60,000 patients were treated at the Rocky Creek Hospital. Today, the only standing building that remains is this strange structure that they call the igloo.
This igloo was built as a temporary building 73 years ago, put up very quickly, and it was used as an entertainment place. The stage was used for vaudeville acts and travelling shows that came through to entertain the troops. There were dances held here, and there were nurses, of course, who were working at the hospital. And there was a great deal of exchange between the Americans and the Australians.
But a more sinister business was taking place in the vast Rocky Creek complex. A secret experiment with the potential to help win the war in the Pacific.
In the Southwest Pacific War, Malaria was every bit as much a threat as the enemy. The US calculated that at any one time, 25% of their soldiers were incapacitated with malaria.
Malaria is a disease that gives you very high fever, aching bones, aching joints, and it recurs. The way that the disease is spread is that a mosquito bites somebody who is infected and then bites somebody else who's not infected. The infection is spread that way.
Mosquitoes thrive in humid, muddy, lowland terrains. The Tablelands' high altitude, away from these insects, was a perfect location for the hospital to treat this disease.
Among the more controversial experiments carried out at Rocky Creek was malaria injections. I think the idea behind subjecting volunteers to the malaria bug was that, as it affected Japanese as well as Allied soldiers, whoever found the cure for malaria would win the war.
Finding a solution for this disease would have given a tactical edge in the South Pacific fight. So no effort was spared. In the midst of it all, the Tablelands railway network was vital. Not only was it bringing patients in, it was also taking them away.
There were 25 trains a day at times, bringing troops here for training and troops who were injured or sick. There are photos that I've seen of them putting people on stretchers through the windows because they didn't fit through the doors.
There were so many patients that Rocky Creek, despite being vast, was not enough. To remedy it, ambulance trains were working around the clock to move patients onto hospitals in the south. Those trains were given priority all along the coast. Much of the Tablelands railways have now disappeared, but there is one section still in use, and the carriages running on it have survived through the different eras of the line.
These carriages, they used to be called grandstand carriages, so they had all the seats lengthwise, and all the seats used to face out towards the views. So when the World War started, Second World War, they actually converted them into the ambulance carriages, so all the seats were taken out.
Those ambulance trains transported both Australian and American soldiers.
They had to be put in different carriages just to save conflict. A lot of the time, the Australians thought that the Americans were dressed a lot better, their uniforms were a lot nicer, and of course the Australian girls all fell for the American charm and the nice uniforms, so they felt that they were stealing the Australian girls away from them.
After the war, the Tablelands transport system was completely transformed. Whilst the troops left behind brand new roads, they also left a railway network in tatters.
The railways suffered extreme wear and tear during the war because they simply hadn't been designed to be used at that intensity. So they required quite a lot of work afterwards to bring them back into a good condition.
The railways became a good employer for the region, especially for indigenous communities. Among them, Dr. George Skeen, a local historian who worked for the railways from 1967 to 1997.
I met many people from all over the world. You know, people from different cultures, and had a good time. You had a bed, single mattress, 2 plates, spoon, knife and fork, a water bag, and the work was very hard.
The government was transforming the basic lines that had been built for the mining industry into reliable, sturdy structures.
I worked on bridges. I was always shaky. I didn't like heights. The risk was crocodiles in bridges. They had people in cages that go down and check the piles in the water. Because salt water is very, I think it erodes timber or something, very quick.
But while the tracks were being refurbished, the roads were becoming more and more prevalent. By the late 1980s, trains had stopped being lucrative, and much of the Tablelands railway network was closed. A page was turned. The building of the railways had changed so much for settlers, but also for indigenous communities. Sisters Daphne Miller and Desley Mosquito are descendants of the Jiribal Rainforest people.
It did disrupt our way of living back then, and probably a little bit more frightening than anything, not knowing what's happening.
It became something that we had to adjust to and depend upon.
The railway was our mode of transport. It was just so easy to go over the road and catch it and travel from here to Cairns. And so it became part of our lifestyle. It was everything to us. Got us where we wanted to go.
The closing down of the railways have left many people with a sense of nostalgia. But luckily, there is a group of people who are making sure the past is not completely gone. The Kuranda Scenic Railway still covers the rainforest section of the line. The efforts of those who carved a way through the thick jungle were not in vain. Today, tourists get to enjoy the stunning views. And incredibly, one of Moffett's hastily built mining routes is also among the few still being used, although it now has a very different looking train.
The Savannah Lander train is amazing. It's a total contrast to a narrow gauge freight railway. It's a stainless steel bullet snaking through the countryside. This sort of lightweight construction with these amazing views from the windows just make the best of the passenger experience out there.
This diesel-powered rail motor is perfect for the train tracks, and it has been carefully refurbished to take tourists through the bush to the west of Cairns.
It's got 1960s kind of like retro styling with its Rolls-Royce diesel engines. It's really rather lovely, just as an object in itself. So to get to ride on it, what an amazing experience.
Will Kemp is one of the two drivers.
We get to move through awesome landscapes, and we get to move a train along a line that's, now the best part of 110 years old. The line's pretty old, pretty unique. The whole thing's just awesome. Every time we come up to one of these roads, we need to let them know we're here. A couple of good big blasts of the horn, just make sure the crossing's clear, and we're sweet. I think with the age of this line and this railway and how long it's been here, there's a lot of secrets attached to it. Lee and I are always hearing new stories that have happened years and years and years ago. One particular one was a couple of years ago. As I told everyone who were coming into this old mining town, I had a passenger come and got really, really excited. He was an older gentleman, but his father was actually a miner in that town and had been killed in a mining accident before this passenger was born, so he never even met his father. He had no idea that the train travelled through that town, so it held a lot of meaning to him, and I'm sure that there's 100, 1,000 stories that we are still yet to hear.
Back in Herberton, the railways have left another legacy.
Tablelands Railway has seen over 130 years of human activity. That's a lot of stories, and it still continues today. There are volunteers out there working, keeping things going.
There are 35 men and counting who volunteer here, along with Rocky the dog. They meet up twice a week in a combined effort to keep the original railway line alive between Herberton and Atherton.
The workshop started about 7 years ago. The built workshop behind me has been built 4 years ago, and that's when we got our steam locomotives in and our equipment.
The volunteers are also working along the railway line, and it brings home what it must have been like for the early railway builders.
Working on a railway in the late 19th century is hard work. You've got tools, to an extent, you've got machinery, but only very limited, and it's still hard work. And one thing that hasn't changed in 130 years is the climate. When it rains, it really rains, and when it's sunny, it's incredibly sunny. So for the volunteers out there today, yes, they might have slightly better hand tools and better machinery, I really hope they have, but the climate, that's still a tough challenge.
From the very beginning, the Tablelands Railway story has been an epic saga of loss and triumph over the elements. And its original line has now left its mark on the region.
Cairns hadn't got the railway. If it had been Port Douglas, they would have been the centre. No, it really did make a world of difference. Cairns became a pivotal place for export and import for far north Queensland, and it's what set this region going as a major centre in far north Queensland.
But it also had a further reaching impact. And the irony of its success is that it ultimately brought about its own demise.
This particular railway line, when they built it, it's civil engineering. It's creating a safe way to move an awful lot of material over quite a long period of time. But suddenly, World War II happens and everything changes. The railway network allowed things to get moving very quickly. At that point, they built a road. So the success of the infrastructure of the railway brought the road, and the road actually condemned the railway.
There is much to be learned from these abandoned tracks.
The Tablelands line, are in many ways a symbol of the human spirit. You realise that it was built for a reason that no longer exists. And so therefore you look at it and you think, maybe it's just a bit of a folly. But actually what happened during the Second World War with the Tablelands line makes you remember that what looks useless today could be very, very useful tomorrow.
But above all, it has left its mark on the lives of those who either worked or travelled along its lines. And no doubt, the next generation will ensure its legacy lives on.